I never imagined that hitting reply all on an email would change my entire career trajectory, but that's exactly what happened 5 years ago. I was sitting in my cramped cubicle at Next Gen Technologies in Boston, staring at my computer screen in disbelief. There it was, my patent application for an energy-efficient semiconductor cooling system, the one I'd spent 3 years developing, now submitted under my boss Richard Dalton's name, with mine buried as a contributing engineer. I'd given this company everything, missed my daughter's soccer games, worked through pneumonia, even postponed surgery to meet deadlines. Richard knew I was a single mom who couldn't afford a lengthy legal battle. He calculated correctly that I wouldn't have the resources to fight back. What he didn't count on was my meticulous documentation habit, something my grandfather, a former Boeing engineer, had drilled into me since childhood. That night, instead of confronting Richard, I made a decision that would later be called either brilliant or insane. I submitted my resignation, effective immediately, but before leaving, I activated my silent revenge plan, a plan that would lie dormant for years until the perfect moment arrived. What happened next at the $2.3 billion acquisition meeting still makes headlines in tech circles across Silicon Valley. I'm about to tell you how I went from nearly losing everything to watching Richard's empire crumble in real time, all because I knew something no one else did. I grew up in Palo Alto before it became the epicenter of tech wealth, back when it was still possible for a public school teacher like my mom to afford a modest home there. My father left when I was 4, but my grandfather, Edward, stepped in as the male figure in my life. He'd worked at NASA's Ames Research Center during the Apollo era and later at Boeing, and he recognized my engineering aptitude early. "Emma," he'd say, "your mind works differently than most people's. That's not a burden, it's a gift." While other kids had sports trophies, I had circuit boards and soldering irons. By 12, I was rebuilding computers from parts I'd scavenged from the electronics recycling center where Grandpa volunteered. My childhood wasn't exactly normal. At Gunn High School, I was the awkward girl who skipped lunch to work in the computer lab. There was this particularly humiliating moment during junior prom when Brandon Weiss, the boy I'd had a crush on for years, loudly announced that he'd only asked me to help with his physics project, not to the dance. The laughter still echoes sometimes. Mom wanted me to be well-rounded, so she insisted I join the debate team. That's where I met Jessie Chen, who became my best friend and eventually my daughter Maya's godmother. Jessie saw past my social awkwardness and recognized something I hadn't yet. I could hold my own against anyone intellectually. After MIT, I landed at Berkeley for my PhD in electrical engineering, focusing on thermal management systems for semiconductors. That's where I met Carl, Maya's father. He was charming, ambitious, and completely unprepared for fatherhood. When I discovered I was pregnant during my final year, he stuck around just long enough to see Maya born before taking a position in Singapore. His support checks came regularly, but his presence didn't. Grandpa Edward became my rock. Every Sunday, we'd gather at his Menlo Park bungalow for his famous sourdough pancakes, a tradition dating back to his San Francisco childhood. It was during one of these breakfasts, with Maya playing on the floor with circuit parts, carefully supervised, that Grandpa handed me a leather-bound notebook. "Document everything," he said. "Every idea, every conversation, every breakthrough. Date it, witness it, secure it." This advice seemed paranoid until my 3rd year at NextGen when I overheard Richard in the break room. "Women engineers are great workers," he told the VP of operations, "but they rarely have the killer instinct for true innovation." This while holding the preliminary report on my cooling system. The grand gesture came unexpectedly on my 38th birthday. Richard announced at the company meeting that he was submitting a patent for the semiconductor cooling system and gave me a special mention and a $5,000 bonus. The room applauded, but Jessie, who had recently joined the legal team, saw my face. "Something's wrong," she whispered. That night, over wine and takeout Chinese food at my kitchen table in Cambridge, I showed her my notebooks, meticulous records of every development stage of the technology, including Richard's dismissive emails when I first proposed it. "This is your patent, Emma," Jessie said, her voice hard with anger. "And I think you know what you need to do." What she didn't know was that I had already begun executing a plan that would require patience, precision, and perfect timing, qualities any good engineer possesses in abundance. For the next 6 months after resigning from NextGen, I lived on my savings and picked up consulting work while submitting job applications across the industry. My LinkedIn messages were filled with confused inquiries. Why would you leave right as your project was getting patented? I couldn't tell them the truth, not yet. The breakthrough came when Axion Microtech, a mid-sized competitor to NextGen, approached me. Their CTO, Diane Wolcott, had questions about my departure that seemed oddly specific. During our interview at their Cambridge office, she slid a folder across the table. "These are the patent applications filed by NextGen in the last year," she said. "I find it interesting that the cooling system bears Richard's name as primary inventor, yet the technical specifications match presentations you gave at conferences." I maintained my composure, but my heart raced. "I'm bound by confidentiality agreements," I replied. Diane smiled. "Of course, but hypothetically, if someone had evidence that intellectual property had been misappropriated, Axion would be very interested." She offered me a senior engineering position with a salary 30% higher than my previous one, along with flexible hours for Maya's sake. I took the job. Within months, I'd established myself as a valuable team member while carefully maintaining my documentation collection. Every night after Maya went to bed, I'd update my files. Emails I'd recovered from backups, meeting notes, time-stamped lab entries. The secret repository grew. Meanwhile, Richard's star was rising. The patent was approved, and NextGen's cooling technology was becoming industry standard. I watched from the sidelines as he appeared in Forbes and gave a TED Talk about his innovation. Each appearance stoked my determination. Then came the rumors of acquisition talks. TechCrunch reported that Meridian Systems, a Silicon Valley giant, was considering purchasing NextGen, primarily for their semiconductor technologies. The figure being discussed was $2.3 billion. At a semiconductor conference in San Jose, I found myself at the same cocktail reception as Richard for the first time since my departure. He was holding court near the bar, surrounded by admirers. "Emma," he called out when he spotted me, too loudly, too jovially. "Come join us. I was just telling everyone about the old team." I approached, smiling professionally. "Richard, congratulations on all your success." "We miss your attention to detail," he said, a barely perceptible emphasis on detail. "The team just hasn't been the same without your support." Several colleagues shifted uncomfortably. They knew what my role had really been. "I hear Meridian is interested in your cooling system," I said. His smile tightened. "Among other technologies, due diligence is proceeding smoothly." "Due diligence," I repeated. "Fascinating process, isn't it? How they examine everything so thoroughly." Something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps concern. "Well, when you have nothing to hide, it's just paperwork," he replied. But his hand gripped his whiskey glass a little tighter. As I walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessie. Meridian's lead counsel called me. They want to talk. The next morning, I met Jessie for coffee at a small bakery in North End. Her expression was grave as she slid into the booth. "They've found discrepancies in the patent documentation," she whispered. "Internal emails that don't align with the timeline Richard presented. They're quietly investigating all of NextGen's IP now." "What does this mean for the acquisition?" I asked. "It's still proceeding, but they're building contingencies." "Emma, they asked specifically about you. They've traced some early prototypes back to your work." I sipped my coffee. "And what did you tell them?" "That they should talk to you directly." She hesitated. Are you ready for what comes next? This could get ugly. Lawsuits, depositions, your name in industry news. I thought of Maya, now 10, who'd watched me rebuild my career piece by piece. I thought of Grandpa Edward, who'd taught me that integrity in engineering wasn't optional. And I thought of Richard, who believed that women lacked the killer instinct. I've been ready for 3 years, I replied, taking out my phone and sending an email I drafted months ago to Meridian's CEO. The meeting is set for Thursday. 3 days later, I walked into Meridian's Boston offices with a single flash drive and Grandpa Edward's leather notebook. In my professional navy suit and with my hair pulled back, I projected the confidence I'd been building since that day in my cubicle. The receptionist directed me to the 14th floor, executive territory. As the elevator ascended, I received a text from an unknown number. Think carefully about what you're doing. Patent disputes can ruin careers, yours included. R. I smiled. Richard was worried, and he should be. The Meridian conference room had that unmistakable tension of a high-stakes meeting. Around the glossy table sat Meridian's CEO Trent Wilson, their chief counsel, 2 board members, and, to my surprise, Richard himself, flanked by NextGen's legal team. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to open hostility. "Miss Harrington, thank you for coming," Trent said, motioning me to an empty chair. "We understand you have information relevant to our acquisition process." Richard cut in before I could respond. "This is highly irregular, Trent. Emma was a valuable team member, but she left NextGen abruptly and may have misconceptions about our IP development." I placed my grandfather's notebook on the table. "I have no misconceptions, Richard. I have documentation." The room fell silent as I connected my flash drive to the projector system. The first slide appeared. My original cooling system schematics dated 3 years prior, with my signature and 2 witness signatures, one belonging to a senior engineer who'd since left NextGen. "This is the original design," I explained calmly, "created 18 months before Richard claims to have conceptualized it." Richard laughed dismissively. Emma was part of a larger team. Her contributions were valued, which is why she received proper credit and compensation. I clicked to the next slide, an email from Richard to the executive team dated just after my initial presentation. "This project has minimal viability. We'll shelve it for now." Then, 16 months later, another email from Richard. "I've been working on a new cooling approach that could revolutionize our product line." Slide after slide appeared, lab access logs showing my weekend work, meeting minutes where my updates were recorded, and most damning, a series of messages between Richard and the patent attorney where my name was systematically removed from documentation. Richard's face had gone from confident to ashen. "This is a mischaracterization," he stammered. "Context is missing." "The context," I said, turning to the final piece of evidence, "is here." I played an audio recording, Richard's voice crystal clear. "Emma's cooling design is brilliant, but we can't have our breakthrough technology associated primarily with a woman engineer. Investors respond better to male leadership in technical innovation. Make sure my name is listed as principal inventor." The room erupted. NextGen's lawyers huddled urgently with Richard. Meridian's counsel was rapidly taking notes. Trent Wilson sat back, his expression unreadable. "Where did you get that recording?" Richard demanded, his voice cracking. "You pocket-dialed me during that meeting," I replied. "And as Grandpa Edward always taught me, document everything." Trent raised his hand for silence. "Miss Harrington, are you prepared to sign an affidavit confirming the authenticity of these materials?" "I am, and I've already filed a formal patent dispute with the USPTO," I added.
My documentation has been held in escrow by my attorney since before I left NextGen. Richard slammed his hand on the table. This is corporate sabotage. She's working for Axion now, a direct competitor. This is clearly an attempt to derail our acquisition. Trent turned to his counsel. What are our options? The lawyer cleared his throat. Based on this evidence, we have several concerns about NextGen's intellectual property claims. At minimum, we would need to renegotiate terms. At worst, the core technology that justified the acquisition price may not legally belong to NextGen. That's absurd, Richard shouted. One disgruntled employee can't— I'm not disgruntled, Richard, I interrupted. I'm the rightful inventor, and unlike you, I can prove it. I stood up, gathering my materials. Mr. Wilson, I didn't come here to stop your acquisition. I came to ensure that when you purchase NextGen's assets, you understand exactly what you're buying and what you're not. My patent dispute will proceed regardless of your decision today. As I walked toward the door, Trent called out,
Harrington, would you be willing to discuss potential arrangements that might benefit both Meridian and yourself? I paused at the threshold. My contact information is in the file. My attorney will be expecting your call. Richard lunged forward. You can't just walk away from this. Do you know what you've done? I turned back one last time. Yes, Richard, I've done exactly what you taught me. I looked out for myself, just like you did. The difference is, I actually did the work. The door closed behind me as chaos erupted in the room. In the elevator down, my hands finally started to shake, but a sense of calm washed over me. After 3 years of silent preparation, I had finally spoken my truth. The fallout was immediate and seismic. By that evening, trading of NextGen stock was temporarily halted. Within days, technology blogs were running headlines like "Patent Dispute Threatens Billion-Dollar Acquisition" and "Whistleblower Engineer Claims Stolen Innovation." I hadn't planned on becoming the center of a tech industry scandal, but there I was. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, former colleagues, even venture capitalists suddenly interested in my next project. Jessie came over that night with a bottle of champagne. "To finally fighting back," she toasted, as we sat on my small balcony overlooking the Charles River. "I don't feel victorious yet," I admitted, "just exposed." "The truth usually feels that way at first," she replied. The following week was a blur of meetings with attorneys and calls from Meridian's negotiation team. Their offer came on Friday. They would proceed with acquiring NextGen, but at a significantly reduced price. More importantly, they wanted to hire me as a technical director to oversee integration of the cooling technology, which they would repatent with me as the primary inventor. "And Richard?" I asked during the call with Trent Wilson. "Mr. Dalton will not be joining Meridian," he replied simply. "His departure terms are confidential." I later learned from former colleagues that Richard had been escorted from the building the day after our meeting. His office contents were delivered to his Beacon Hill townhouse in cardboard boxes. My daughter, Maya, now perceptive beyond her years, noticed my transformation immediately. "Mom, you're smiling more," she observed as we walked through Boston Common that weekend. "I guess I am," I said, squeezing her hand. "Is it because you don't have to keep secrets anymore?" Children see everything. Yes, partly that, and partly because I stood up for myself. Like when you told me to do with Zoe when she was copying my science project? I laughed. Exactly like that. Not everyone supported my actions. My mother called from California, concerned after seeing an online article. "Emma, was this really necessary? Couldn't you have handled it privately?" "Mom, I tried private. I tried reasonable. Sometimes wrong things need to be exposed to be fixed." There was a pause. "Your grandfather would be proud," she finally said. "He always said you had steel in your spine." The most unexpected call came 3 weeks later.
Diane Wolcott from Axion sounded uncharacteristically hesitant. Emma, I need to be honest with you. We knew about Richard's creative attribution practices when we hired you. I sat down slowly. You knew? We'd heard rumors, nothing provable. When you left NextGen so abruptly, we connected the dots. Your hiring wasn't purely coincidental. You used me as industrial intelligence, I realized. I prefer to think we recognized your value when NextGen didn't, she countered. But yes, we hoped you might eventually provide leverage against them. I should have been angry, but instead, I felt an odd respect for the strategic play. And now? Now, we'd like to offer you a vice presidency. Our board feels your expertise and, frankly, your demonstrated integrity would be assets to our leadership team. I declined Axion's offer the same day I accepted Meridian's. Something about building rather than tearing down appealed to me more. 6 months later, the patent was officially reassigned with my name as primary inventor. The cooling technology, now under Meridian's development, was being implemented in next-generation processors worldwide. My grandfather's leather notebook sat framed in my new corner office overlooking Boston Harbor. The most surprising consequence came in the form of emails and messages from women engineers across the country, stories of similar experiences, gratitude for speaking up, questions about how to protect their own innovations. I began mentoring several young engineers and speaking at Women in STEM conferences.
At one such event at MIT, I spotted a familiar face in the audience. Brandon Weiss, my high school crush turned prom humiliator. He approached afterward, now balding and carrying a few extra pounds. "Emma, I don't know if you remember me, but—" "I remember," I said, neither warm nor cold. He shifted uncomfortably. "I work in venture capital now. We're always looking for innovations like yours." He handed me his card. "If you're ever developing something new—" I took the card, suppressing a smile at life's circular nature. "I'll keep that in mind, Brandon." The unexpected twist came nearly a year after the acquisition. I received an email from Richard's former executive assistant, Margot. She had left NextGen before the acquisition, but had maintained copies of certain files for insurance purposes. "There's something you should see," her message read, with an attachment. The document was a draft of a recommendation letter written by Richard for an innovation award he'd apparently planned to nominate me for, dated just weeks before he claimed my patent. In it, he praised my groundbreaking approach and singular vision on the cooling system. "I believe Emma Harrington represents the future of American engineering excellence," he had written, "and I consider it my privilege to have supported her work." I stared at the screen for a long time. He had recognized my contribution, valued it even, right before deciding to steal it. The complexity of human motivation never ceased to amaze me. That night, I added the letter to my grandfather's notebook, now bulging with the documentation of my journey. On the inside cover, I wrote a new inscription. "For Maya, truth leaves tracks. Follow them." 3 years after the confrontation, at the annual Women in Technology Gala in San Francisco, I found myself on stage receiving the Innovator of the Year award. Looking out at the audience of brilliant women and supportive allies, I felt the full circle of my journey. Richard, I'd heard, had relocated to Austin to work with a startup. The semiconductor cooling system, my system, was now standard in devices used by millions worldwide. And I had finally moved from documentation once again, leading Meridian's new sustainable computing initiative. The truth hadn't just set me free, it had rebuilt me. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder if I should have confronted Richard earlier, fought harder, or made different choices. But engineering isn't just about designing systems. It's about understanding timing, pressure points, and structural integrity. Sometimes, the strongest response requires patience and precision. My story isn't unique in tech or in any industry where power and credit are currency. What makes it different is that I had evidence because someone taught me early that my ideas were worth protecting. If you're facing a similar situation, whether it's intellectual theft, workplace injustice, or simply not receiving credit for your contributions, remember this. Document everything, build your support network, and recognize that speaking your truth may take time, but it changes things. For those who found value in my story, please subscribe to this channel for more real-life accounts of workplace justice and professional redemption. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that patience and preparation can ultimately triumph over power and privilege. Sometimes, the quietest resignation becomes the loudest statement when the timing is right.